Welcome to Biblical Aramaic for Biblical Interpreters, Grammar Lessons. This is Lesson 7, in which we will be talking about numbers. For more information on this topic, you can look at Biblical Aramaic for Biblical Interpreters, pages 44 to 51. For now, let's open our Hebrew Bibles to page 1385. This is in the book of Daniel. We will zoom in and look particularly at Daniel 2, verse 40, especially the final word in this particular line. There's a circle above this word that directs our attention to this Masoretic note in the margin. Now, most programs of elementary Hebrew instruction do not have enough time to discuss the meaning of these notes, but because they appear for the Aramaic sections of Ezra and Daniel, and because they contain a number system, it's appropriate right now just to spend a few moments talking about it. So here I've reproduced that word. It's a feminine singular adjective, and we see that from the comet's hey suffix. It means something like strong or mighty. I've also reproduced the Masoretic note. And for the sake of analyzing it, we're going to make use of this excellent chapter by David Marcus, the Masorah of the Aramaic section of Daniel. This is what it means. Now we see here at the beginning of the note that there's a gimel with a dot over it. This is part of the system of representing numbers, in which an aleph with a dot over it would be the number 1, beit dot over it, number 2, gimel, as here, with a dot over it would be number 3 in this system. So what does this note mean? This means that this word appears 3 times altogether. 2 times it's written with a hey. And that's referring, of course, to this suffix right here. And we can see how this word, this abbreviated word that says written with right here, that it makes sense that that's what it means, because this is alluding to the verbal root kaf, tav, beit. So far we have the word appears 3 times. 2 times it's written with hey, and 1 time it's written with aleph. And this is 1 time. It's the conjunction plus the word chad. It's the spelled out word for number 1. And it could be in this Masoretic note that because of the fact that an aleph would show up later to represent aleph, that the Masoretes felt that they shouldn't use aleph with a dot over it for disambiguating what they were talking about, that reason. So 1 time written with aleph, and that's referring to the interchange of comets hey and comets aleph that we have talked about before. So speaking of how numbers can be fully written out, let's look at these words. First, let's look at this first column. My meaning is, with this heading, that the numbers in this column are going to enumerate masculine nouns. Likewise, the numbers in this column next to it are going to enumerate feminine nouns. And this makes great sense. Chad, we would expect, would be masculine, and chada would be feminine. There's your comets hey suffix. So we would expect, by just general agreement expectations, comets hey suffixes, different spellings, as is the case with the number 2. But we get to number 3 and beyond, and we see something very strange taking place, right? It looks like the numbers that are supposed to enumerate masculine nouns have comets hey endings, like feminine words do. And then the numbers that are supposed to enumerate feminine nouns lack these comets hey suffixes. And it's interesting, this happens with other Semitic languages too. Hebrew is exactly like this. Numbers 1 and 2 look like they match up in gender with the nouns that they're enumerating, and the numbers 3 through 10 look like there's a gender mismatch. Now, it certainly doesn't change the gender of the noun, and this is just the agreement pattern that is manifested in Scripture, so we need to pay attention to it. Now, just interestingly, before we depart from talking about this, we notice that the ordinal numbers do not have this gender switching attribute. The ordinal numbers 1st through 10th are masculine and feminine according to expectation from form. Let's continue. Chad. In Daniel 2:31, we see the use of this word chad, and it means something like a great image. Now, I bring this up because, of course, when we say a great image, there is one of those things that's being discussed, in this case an image, and there's the gender agreement between Zalem and this Chad word. But it looks like the point is not that there's one of them, but that there's just an image. And this is the use of the number 1, and it appears it's to designate something like an indefinite article idea. In languages of the world that do not have articles yet, it looks like indefinite articles begin to develop at some point from the number 1. And it looks like we're seeing this in Aramaic. Of course, the number 1 can actually mean the number 1. So in Ezra 6:3, we see in year 1, where Shana is the year word, and that's the construct form that we see there. And then the absolute at the end of the construct chain is Chada, which is the feminine form of the number 1, matching the feminine noun year. That makes sense. But then 4 men in Daniel 3:25 manifests this apparent gender switching of the number, because of course men, the grammatical gender matches the natural gender. It's masculine, but the number for 4 has a comet's hey ending. Now I've placed gray onto the chart now to show that the grayed out words actually don't appear in the Bible. These are reconstructed forms as far as the vowels go from extra-biblical Aramaic of the period, such as Qumran writings and so forth. So they're placed on the table merely to demonstrate that, of course, biblical Aramaic, that language, had the ability to express numbers 1 through 10, and the entire chart would have been filled in notionally. It's just that for the numbers where you have double dash, there's no surviving Aramaic manuscript really of the time anywhere that attests these numbers. Moving on to numbers 11 through 19, actually only one of these numbers is attested in the Bible. Daniel 4:26 has 12 months. Okay, the months word, as you can see, is masculine plural. Now we're noticing that the 10 word is matching with 2. So both of those words, the 2 word and the 10 word, both are masculine, and that makes sense. But it looks like from extra biblical Aramaic of the time that the pattern would continue of having the small digit, not the 10 word, but the other word, taking the opposite grammatical gender form is the way that the gender matching works. So 13, for instance, has the 3 word with a comet's hey, and so forth. Now, of course, larger numbers also appear in the Bible, but this is interesting. There are a lot of grayed out numbers here, meaning words that do not appear in biblical Aramaic. Even in Hebrew Daniel and Hebrew Ezra, there are more numbers than in Aramaic Daniel and Aramaic Ezra. We have this compound number, 62 years, and it just requires some explanation of what's going on here. So we've already said Shana is a feminine noun, but it takes the irregular plural where it looks like masculine plural ending, but it's still feminine, of course. Where here is the word for 60, and here is the word for 2, and that's the feminine. If we wanted to go back and look at that number chart, we would see that that's the feminine form. It's matching years as a feminine word. And there's not really a separate set of these tens digit words differentiated by gender. So what I'm showing is that the gender matching is taking place with the smaller digit word. And then here, for the hundreds, beyond what we would see with 200 with the dual form, you see the dual ending of ayin, that there are masculine form numbers without regard to gender matching for whatever noun is being enumerated. And then same thing over here. All that having been said, the only Aramaic number that appears in the Aramaic scripture is 400. And then there's a separate word over here for 10,000. So all that having been said, again, there are not many numbers in the actual Aramaic scripture spelled out, but it is important to remember the spelled out number system. And if we're going to be doing deeper work in the text, it would be helpful to be able to understand that there are actually numerals in the abbreviation system in the Masoretic notes. For now, I look forward to covering Lesson 8 with you soon.